Well, I'm going to start by saying a bit about me and my kind of personal, I suppose, intellectual biography, my trajectory in my work. I studied sociology at, I suppose, the historic heart of British sociology at LSE, but I didn't do the mainstream sociology degree that existed then. I did the BSA Econ, which I think has been abolished long since, which was a kind of interdisciplinary social science degree. I had a special subject in sociology, but you had to do options courses from all over the place, and I took courses from government, social administration, law, international history and modern languages. So from the very start, I was kind of choosing an interdisciplinary way of coming at sociology. My PhD was also at LSE, and it was an ethnographic study and feminist political analysis of the Greenham Common Women's Peace Camp, registered in the sociology department, but actually struggling all the way through to locate itself intellectually in the not yet really well-formed interdisciplinary field of gender and sexuality studies. So somewhere between contemporary history, because I was studying something that was in the very recent past, political sociology, international relations, because I was interested in the kind of global formations of power that were at play in the peace movement in the 1980s and their gendered aspects, and social psychology, because I was also interested in issues of identity and subjectivity and experience, and the transformations that women went through in getting involved in that particular instance of political action. So I started first attending BSA conferences whilst I was a PhD student, and I loved them. I loved the community and the camaraderie and the Women's Caucus and the Sexual Division Study Group. Even the terminology seems incredibly dated now, but it was great. But I never really felt that my work fitted. I felt I found a community there, but my research wasn't quite sociology. I got involved in the Women's Studies Network, which later became the Feminist and Women's Studies Association, and the Women's History Network. And so somewhere between those kind of communities, I suppose I was doing my work. My first academic job was then in the Department of Sociology and Social Policy at Leeds, which was newly merged just before I arrived. And there I started collaborating with social policy scholars, particularly Kirk Mann initially, later Fiona Williams. And the first sort of thing that I did as I suppose, an academic citizen was I set up the new undergraduate degree in women's studies, as it then was. That over time led to the establishment of the Centre for Interdisciplinary Gender Studies. As the field moved from women's studies to gender studies, we set up a raft of master's and PhD programmes in gender studies, which are still going. And when I was promoted to a professorship, I chose the title Professor of Sociology and Gender Studies, which sort of captured this kind of dual aspect to my work. Between 1999 and 2004, I was part of an ESRC research group, the Research Group for the Study of Care, Values and the Future of Welfare, CARVA as it was called. And I found myself immersed in the literature on social policy and welfare and the ethics of care. I was carrying out research on unconventional practices of intimacy that spoke to queer theory and sexuality studies. And then I began to dip my toes into psychoanalysis. And here I was very much in dialogue with Wendy Holway, who was part of the research group. I was finding myself increasingly dissatisfied by the methodologies that I had learnt as a sociologist that I'd been using. Sort of the traditional semi-structured interview, which seemed to just produce the kind of dominant discourses that were available to people, and that took people's words as a straightforward representation either of what they thought or of what the dominant discourse at the time was. And once I started to really kind of think about and read around the question of what might underlie the words that people were able to speak, and the lack of fit there may be between experience and discourse and language, there wasn't really any turning back. And my kind of psychosocial turn, I suppose, was underway. But actually its roots were back there in my PhD when I was kind of reading around the kind of social psychology literature of the time. And by 2005, I'd started a process of training, clinical training in group analysis and psychoanalytic psychotherapy, because I felt like I really wanted to kind of get inside this different way of thinking. And I started to identify with the emerging field that was developing, particularly in Britain, of psychosocial studies. So I was feeling myself further and further away from sociology as I was doing this. And that then wasn't helped by my attempt to get published, to my new psychosocial work that I was doing being rejected in 2004, just sort of around this rather kind of delicate time of feeling my way into this new field by sociology. In 2007, then I moved from Leeds, where I'd been for a long time, to Birkbeck. I took up the job of directing the Birkbeck Institute for Social Research. But what I was really attracted by was the fact there was a group of people, there was a centre for psychosocial studies at Birkbeck. And whilst I was initially appointed into the Department of Politics and Sociology, which very quickly after dropped the sociology from its title, I got involved in setting up a new department of psychosocial studies at Birkbeck. But actually, then rather quickly, being the contrary, margins-hugging kind of person that I now see I'm inclined to be, I found myself feeling rather on the edge there too. So I'd gone from Leeds, from a kind of mainstream department of sociology and social policy, seeking out psychosocial studies scholars to be part of their gang and to form a new department. And lo and behold, there I was, feeling like I didn't fit again. And what I realised was that I was then, in this new department, at the extreme social end of the psychosocial, because I was surrounded by people who'd come to the psychosocial from psychology. I was too much of a sociologist. I was too empirical at heart. I was, not really theoretically strong enough or theoretically abstract enough, and certainly not psycho enough to really feel part of this psychosocial studies thing that we were building. Yet I was also aware, because I was training as a group analyst, that I had a particular penchant for not feeling part of things and occupying a kind of maybe rather safe position of marginality and being on the sidelines. But at Birkbeck I had the role of putting together the sociology ref submission, leading sociology, which is what we had to submit as, this kind of rather motley crew of psychosocial studies people, plus some geographers and a few cultural studies people, and this is what has happened historically in a number of places. Those submissions that haven't deserted sociology altogether sometimes are these kind of rather interesting gatherings of people under the label of sociology. And at Birkbeck I was actually the most sociologist of this group, and I was the one who had to kind of put it together and make a case that what people were doing was in some way sociology, or at least it was social research with a kind of sociological bent. And that meant I had a kind of institutional responsibility, I suppose, to kind of step up to the plate and act as if I was a sociologist a bit more, because I was more of a sociologist than most of the other people there. And I couldn't really quite get away with saying anymore that I was completely marginal to sociology. Even if I was still nursing my kind of grudge about having been rejected by the journal in 2004.